Hello and welcome into the KE Report. I'm your host, Shad Markwitz, and today we're getting an update on Sierra Madre Gold and Silver. Sierra Madre is traded on the TSXV under the ticker SM and on the OTCQX under the ticker SMDRF. And I'm joined today with the president and CEO of Sierra Madre Gold and Silver, Alex Langer. And Alex, great to have you back on the show to get an update on Sierra Madre. What really tripped my trigger was the news that you put out on December the 10th. And the reason I reached out is it looks like you've hit industrial production at the Guitarra Mine. This is in Mexico where you've been ramping up production. Now, you're still not in commercial production yet, so explain to people the difference here between industrial production, commercial production, and looking ahead to Q1, how you see things ramping up at the Guitarra Mine.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thanks so much for having us, Shad. Always a pleasure to chat. Yeah, so Sierra Madre, we did announce industrial production on December 10th, so just a few weeks ago. In essence, what we've done is we've announced full milling and processing facility at the Guitarra mine is fully operational. So we're running at about 504 tons per day. We've been doing that for at least about a month now, almost 2 months, which has been great. And what that allows us to do is to get into full commercial production, should happen towards the end of the year or very, very beginning of January. And what that is, in essence, is for accounting purposes, will be full commercial production on that date, and also allows us to get into a couple more areas in the underground. But once we're in full commercial production, we'll be able to start to record our proper numbers. So we'll be able to write off our interest rates. We'll be able to capitalize a lot of the plant and machinery and things like that. And then eventually at the end of Q1 of 2025, we'll be able to talk about an all-in sustaining costs and things like that. Now, if you look at our financials for year end, I think people will be hopefully pleasantly surprised. Things have gone extraordinarily well. Again, we are still in test mining, industrial production, so we can't exactly give guidance on what the cost will be and what the numbers look like. But if you went through our financials, you get a really good idea of how well things are going.
Well, and to that point, Alex, I've talked to a couple of people about the company, and they said, well, there's not really an official guidance where I guess economic reports where we can know what the costs are. You made the point in our last discussion a couple months back that you have a really good sense of what the costs are going to be because this mine has produced for years up until 2018, and you already are producing now as you ramp up. So give people a sense of why you're not going through the whole process of putting out economic reports here, because in a couple of weeks, people can just read the production profile and the costs coming out of the company. And then as you go into commercial production in Q1, moving forward quarter to quarter, people can just look at the actual numbers instead of a hypothesis. So maybe just speak to the rationale behind why you didn't put out economic studies.
Yeah, a couple of reasons there, and you definitely hit the nail on the head there, Shad. And it's because this mine was in production in 2018. So we understand our costs quite well. We understand our processing costs. That's the cost for the reagent and the chemicals we're using. We have our energy costs. That's quite simple. We're attached to the grid, and you can work backwards on there. Even our manpower. It was a 6% raise from what the workers were getting in 2018. And, to do a feasibility study or a bankable feasibility study or a definitive bankable feasibility study can take months, if not years, or a couple years if you want to go through that whole process, as well as it's quite expensive. So for us, again, we were very, very comfortable with the numbers. Our largest shareholder and the group that lent us the $5 million US to finalize the final bit of capex we need to get into production. First Majestic was very comfortable with our numbers as well. So we decided to kind of push ahead, which is obviously a little bit risky, but we were very confident with those numbers. So it was a timing issue as well as a cost issue. Historically, the mine was producing around $13 all-in sustaining costs. Obviously, we're going to be higher than that just because the times have changed. Things have obviously got more expensive. We do have a couple analysts that follow us, and they have us pegged around 18 to 20 all-in sustaining costs. And we're confident we should be able to be around that range, if not beat that a little bit. So gives people a pretty good guidance of where we think we'll get to once we hit full commercial production. So obviously for Q4, we weren't at full commercial production yet, but for Q1 of 2025, we should be at full commercial production, and we should be within that range.
Well, and Alex, let's talk about the potential to ramp things up over time. I believe that in 2025, the plan is, if I remember, just to keep things at the 500 tons per day for the full calendar year, let the mine stretch its legs, get that process going, hopefully in a rising silver price environment. But then you do have some different equipment and some different strategy on how you could move the production up to 650 tons per day, then I think 750 tons per day, and then even 1,000 tons per day over the next couple of years. So just walk us through what equipment would you need? What would that process look like to ramp up basically in years 2 and 3?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the plan, and we kind of guided towards that. We'd love to hit 1,000 tons per day by the end of 2027. But again, we want to walk before we run. So for 2025, the plan is to run at 500 tons per day on average for the full calendar year, which is great. Especially today's prices, we'll be able to start to generate some very strong cash flows and then use those cash flows to expand the mill as well as explore, which I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit. So step one for us to get up to 650 tons per day approximately is relatively straightforward. The flotation plants are actually graded for 1,200 tons per day, and the grinding and the crusher is good for 650 tons per day. So our largest bottleneck is a grinding circuit, and that's the ball mills. We do have 3 operational ball mills. There is a 4th one. It doesn't work, so what we look to do is replace that ball mill. We'd overbuild as well, so we could probably put in a 400 to 500 ton per day ball mill for about $1 million US. That's not a huge amount of money, and that's for a brand new machine. There's space for it. There's power. It's in essence, getting the machine and then installing it. And that would let us get up to about 1,000 tons per day. So that's only about $1 million US. We feel with $1 million US, we'll get up to about 640, 650 tons per day. And we love to hit that in 2026 and then gradually move up to 750. To get to 750, we'd have to add a secondary cone crusher. Again, not a huge expense, very something similar you would find to like a roadside, building material, simple cone crushing. We would just duplicate the circuit there, and that would get us up to about 750. And then finally, to get up to 1,000, we would have to add a secondary full jaw crusher. We do have some, initial quotes on that for about $2 million US. I think it'll be a bit more than that. These things always seem to end up costing a bit more. So we've kind of budgeted, 3 to 4 for that full circuit. So for around $5 million US, we do feel we can get to 1,000 tons per day by the end of 2027. And we look to do that all out of cash flows. However, if we are in production, full production generating income, there's probably ways to lease that as well. So again, if there's any cash flow constraints, we can play around with that as well when that time comes.
Well, and Alex, I think people will recognize that as a silver producer, and we're going to see what the costs are once Q1 commercial numbers come in, but as a producer, you have a big leverage to really every dollar that silver creeps higher. And you do have some gold exposure as well, so you got a gold kicker. But maybe just talk to the leverage that you would have as far as growth, not just from raising the production profile, but just from incremental moves in the metals price if we see that play out in 2025.
Yeah, it is truly amazing. When we had ran out any of our numbers, when we decided to take the mine into test mining and now into full commercial production, I ran all my models at about $22 silver and $1,800 gold. And at those prices, we made money. It was perfect. We were able to pay off our debts, able to, store some capital as well with the free cash flow that we will be generating. So at today's prices, it's significant. We've had sales up to $32 US an ounce of silver, which is fantastic, even at $30. But every dollar that the silver price increases really adds to the bottom line. It's amazing how your costs stay the same, but your profits just go up. We've been really fortunate as well. As you mentioned, we do have a good gold kicker, and the price of gold has been extraordinary. We expect silver to catch up eventually, but just for the cost of gold, it's been really, really helpful. Now, traditionally, the mine's value in terms of the concentrate sold was around 70 to 65 to 70% silver, but with the high gold prices, we're getting such a good gold kicker that it's been really close to 50-50. Now, I expect that to change as silver goes up, but we do have leverage on both commodities. So, our cost per ounce as these prices go up, especially gold, really drops. And then our profitability really increases when silver does move.
Well, and obviously that allows you, as you say, to pay down the debt quicker. Could you just remind us of the debt situation? And I know you have that non-revolving secured term loan with First Majestic. They helped you out as partners. So maybe just talk about if we have these higher metals prices, how could that accelerate the payback?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was a very simple term, 2-year loan at 15% interest. It was $5 million US. We drew that down in May, and we had a 6-month payment holiday, and we actually just started making interest payments in December. You could do the math backwards, but it's 62,500 US a month, which is not a problem, especially with the cash flows we're generating. And we are due the lump sum in May of 2026. And for whatever reason, if we're able to pay it back earlier, let's say silver does climb up and we decide to, angle more capital towards the loan repayment, there's no early repayment penalties or anything like that. So super friendly loan. We can pay it back early at any time and then save on that interest as well. So it's non-capitalized in terms of the loan. We'd owe, 5 million plus the first 6 months of interest due in 2026 in May. Or we can pay that back early again if silver prices or even gold prices do continue to appreciate.
All right, appreciate you breaking that down, Alex. And then I want to pan back a little bit and look at the larger picture here on your land package. Because while the La Guitarra mine is front and center for getting things up and running, getting that organic growth coming in, getting the production profile coming in, you still have a lot of other areas of interest on your land package. We got into this a little bit in our last conversation, but I've had a lot of conversations, Alex, with other investors about Sierra Madre, and they said, well, it's just going to be a small production center. And I think they're missing the forest for the trees here because you have these other areas like Mina de Agua, and you have, the Santa Ana vein there, but you also have areas like Coloso and Nazareno up kind of more to the northwest of the project. And there is some infrastructure in place that First Majestic had worked on, including, I think you mentioned Wi-Fi access underground at the Coloso mine area. And those are the high grade areas. And then just nearby, you have some bulk tonnage targets at the Nazareno mine. So maybe walk through how some of these other areas of interest could sort of feed the beast as time goes by.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, to remind everybody, the real reason we purchased the mine and what we love about it is the exploration potential. We truly feel it's one of the largest undeveloped silver districts in all of Mexico. There's 8 significant former mines within our project boundary, which is huge, especially for a small junior. You might be lucky you have 1 or 2 of those, but the fact that we have 8 is quite significant. So we do want to generate cash flows and then go explore the rest of the project. We push towards production quicker, generate cash flows, which I think made a lot of sense, especially at the time. And I think today, the ability not to have to go to the market to constantly raise capital as a shareholder, as a significant shareholder, it means a lot. So, less dilution, and, that's really important in terms of equity when you're running these companies. So you mentioned Coloso. Coloso is very close to the current La Guitarra mine. That's where we're mining right now is La Guitarra, and that's where the mill is located. But about 4 kilometers north of the project is Coloso. So Coloso is an area that First Majestic put into production. It's a very, very brand new facility. It was built in 2013, shut down in 2018, but it's modern. It's big. You can drive in, really large trucks through it. There's, lunchrooms underground with power. There's Wi-Fi. There's full ventilation. And it also happens to be the highest grade portion of the mine. So we'd always plan to bring that area back online towards the end of 2025. It runs about 350 grams silver equivalent, so close to 30 to 40% higher grade than La Guitarra. And it looks like we'll actually be getting into that area quicker than originally planned. So every step of the way, whenever I head down there, I was there a few weeks ago, I was expecting, December-ish to see Coloso come online. But, the current mining plan actually has that coming online, maybe the end of March, early April. So again, another 6, 7 months earlier than planned. And again, it's super high grade, which is great, which allows for, better recoveries and, theoretically higher revenue. Now, that area is also attached to Nazareno. Now, Nazareno is going to be quite interesting when we need further material to process. So what's great about Nazareno is it is bulk tonnage. However, it is lower grade, but you're looking at kind of blasting up to 30 to 40 meter intervals, which are, huge amounts of material that you'd be blasting, and that would give you a lot of production. So we blend that with some of the Coloso material to even out the grades are right around 220 grams. So those are the next 2 areas that'll come online. Looks like Coloso here in the next couple months, and then finally Nazareno when we do need more material for the higher grade throughput. So we can get up to 650, 750, and definitely 1,000 tons per day. We'll have to be taking quite a bit of material from Nazareno, which is good. But for the time being, we are mining from La Guitarra, and that's the largest area of the resource, current resource that we did about a year ago.
But in a nutshell, all of the production that you're expecting from La Guitarra, you haven't even factored in what Coloso and then eventually Nazareno could contribute. Is that correct?
To a degree. So it's quite interesting. To date, about 50% of all the material we process has been off resource. So it's areas where we're trying to get into some of the high grade area within the resource itself. And lo and behold, as you would find a lot of Mexican mines, especially these vein type systems, a little sulfidation is we're intersecting more and more veins. And we're actually processing that material and generating capital from off resource material. We're able to blend that with some of the rataques we have as we get into some of these areas. So yeah, 50% of the material to date has been off resource, which is, as expected, but also a nice surprise.
Well, let's also talk about the resources because you did put out a resource update in 2023, and that was pulling from mostly La Guitarra, Coloso, and Nazareno. But I think you also had some inferred resources from the La Guitarra tailings. We haven't really talked about the tailings yet. Remind us of, I guess, some of the pay dirt sitting there at surface.
Yeah, it's about 2.4 million tons of tailings. They run at about half-gram gold, which is quite high grade. Now, that material has already been through the mill, so theoretically, you wouldn't want to reprocess that material using the same methodology, which is flotation. You might be able to get a little bit, but it wouldn't make much sense to do it now. Having said that, if we were able to get a cyanide permit at the mine. It's never been applied for. We do feel there's an opportunity to perhaps get it in the next year or two. Then you'd be able to reprocess those tailings quite economically. I know First Majestic did a number of feasibility studies looking at the tailings, which would be great. So, cyanide, not only could we reprocess the tailings, but it also allow us to get better recoveries and lower the costs, especially on the gold side in terms of production. So, some of those studies did show that if you were able to get cyanide, and it's something if we wanted to do, and if, everyone was comfortable with it, cyanide does have a bad connotation in the market. Even though, cyanide is relatively safe, especially if you do it properly, it'd be fully encapsulated. We would have it, within freestanding structures and all that good stuff. But it could lower the cost per ounce of close to 15 to 20%, which, if you're at 1,000 tons per day, could be quite significant. So it's something we will look at. It's something we probably will apply for when the timing is right. And if we're able to get the cyanide, then you could reprocess those tailings as well, kind of just as a freebie.
Yeah, and I think that it's used effectively all across the mining industry. So it is a common practice, and it would be something where it just depends on the permit. And if you can get that, obviously, a little bit of question in the air still with Mexico as far as some of the permits, but it would be another value driver for the company and easy to unlock more value if you could process it, get the higher recoveries. Let's also feed the people interested in the exploration part of this story, Alex, with some of the targets that you have, I guess, a little to the south of La Guitarra, things like Mina de Agua, Animus, El Rincon. There's some interesting areas of note down there where you'd love to get some drilling going down the road. Just remind people why the team's excited about some of those targets.
Yeah, absolutely. So we've kind of broken in the project into the East and West districts. So the West district's La Guitarra, Coloso, Nazareno. And then if we move to the East district, that's where the real exploration potential is. So to date, we've identified over 60 kilometers of vein material at surface just within the East district. That's whether it's breccia or literally veins at surface. We've sampled it. We have our own lab, so we're able to process this information really quickly. We take about 200 samples a week of exploration material at surface. We have 3 full-time field geologists that are constantly mapping and processing that information. The plan over the next few months here, probably towards March, April, if silver prices stay here and we're able to generate cash flow we're expecting, is we'll start to trench a lot of that vein material. You want to have more than one point of data when you're drilling. So what we want to do is trench, get that data, and then hope to drill kind of October of 2025. So we want to have at least 2 to 3 million US, I would say, saved up just for the drilling program. 60 kilometers is a lot of material to test. So trenching can really help target properly where you want to, eventually put in drilling, which costs quite a bit more. Now, drilling in Mexico isn't very expensive, especially where we're located. It's probably about 110 meters all in US. So really not a huge amount of capital, but you want to be very, very selective. Greg says if he doesn't hit 80% of his drill targets, he'll fire himself. And Greg's my chief operating officer and he's our executive chairman. So I need him. So we got to make sure he has enough data before we launch into a full scale drilling campaign. So the rainy season ends in October, and that would be the goal, again, to use those cash flows to go explore the rest of the area. I just remind a couple people, the Mina de Agua and El Rincon were 2 kind of major mines. Mina de Agua was 10 to 15,000 workers at one point, shut down in about 1910. I got a little bit too deep. The mine flooded. And, back then there was really no technology or methodology to dewater the mine. So it just kind of sat there. El Rincon, a very similar story. That was in production until 1930. What was amazing about El Rincon was the head grade. When the mine shut down, it was running at about 6.5 grams gold and 850 grams silver. So just exceptional grade. And that's a prize that we do have at La Guitarra. And that's where we want to journey the income and then go explore the rest of the mines, including Mina de Agua and El Rincon. And if all goes well, we should be in a position to hopefully start drilling after the rainy season, which would be October, November of next year.
Well, I love the idea of doing the exploration funded through organic growth out of the production. So, a lot going on with the company here as far as the production ramping up to commercial production right around the corner, the potential to grow that over the next couple of years with equipment, the potential to bring in mine number two at Colosso, and then feed the beast even the year after with some of the Nazareno material. You've got all these exploration targets. I guess just as we wrap up, Alex, what do you want investors to have as the key takeaway as far as the trajectory of Sierra Madre Gold and Silver? What are the key milestones you want them watching out for? And how do you want to separate the wheat from the chaff as far as some of your peers in the industry? Why should people look at Sierra Madre Gold and Silver as a potential investment in their own portfolio?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually started this company because I was looking for an investable silver story for myself. So I think I've invested about $1.6 million personally, which is a significant amount. And Greg's probably invested about 1.2, 1.3. So first off, we are large shareholders. We really believe in what we're doing, and we've kind of put our money behind our mouth in terms of Sierra Madre. So, what I love about the story is the ability to generate cash flows to go explore the rest of the project. We have a whole district there, so there is a possibility of finding something very, very significant, which I think the market really likes. We have about 50 million ounces of silver equivalent, which is a fine number. It's not huge, but we really feel truly that we can grow that. Again, we feel this is one of the largest undiscovered silver districts in Mexico, and we want to be able to prove that out. So the fact that we don't need to go back to the market all the time to raise more capital and dilute shareholders is really a key component of what we built. I love the idea, very similar to what First Majestic did, what Endeavor Silver did, what Fortuna Silver did. When I was at Canaccord, I was fortunate enough to be part of the IPOs for Endeavor and Fortuna. And again, what I loved about both those companies is they skyrocketed, especially when silver ran, but they were able to grow organically and build more ounces and buy more assets and increase their throughput with minimal dilution. Sure, they raised capital, but it was always at higher prices. So they've done an incredible job, and I feel we can do something very, very similar. And with an asset like La Guitarra, we could, probably just do it with La Guitarra, but we're always looking for other things at the same time. So I think you have a strong management team with a lot of history in Mexico that is definitely aligned with investors, which is great. And then we also have the silver upside. So every dollar the price of silver goes up, we generate more cash flows, which is great. And if silver does run, like a lot of people are hoping, including myself and expecting, then significant revenues could be generated, and we'll just go out and find more silver, which is the fun part.
All right. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, a lot of potential to grow through production, through rising silver prices, through acquisitions, and through exploration. So really checking a lot of different boxes. I am a shareholder of Sierra Madre Gold and Silver in full disclosure, so I'm biased in that sense. But I think it's an interesting company to at least follow along with. We're going to be watching keenly how things go in Q1, Alex. And for people listening in, if you want to follow along with the news, definitely click on the link below this interview. It takes you right over to the Sierra Madre website, straight to their news section, where you can sign up for updates or just follow along with the news as it hits the wires. Alex, keep us posted. As more news breaks, we'll get you back on for an update in the new year. Have a happy holidays, wishing the team at Sierra Madre a happy holiday season and a happy new year. And we'll talk to you again next year.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Shad, and happy holidays and happy New Year's to all your listeners as well. And thank you again for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciate it.